must be looked at. There have been a lot of issues around which we have dwelled upon. The first one was the overall understanding of the NEP. Dr. Anil Sadgopal helped us with it. Post that, we had Dr. Hargopal looking into the political economy context of the NEP. Post that, we had Professor Joga Singh helping us with understanding the issues of the languages. And then we had we also had the issue of sorry. Then the fourth webinar actually dwelled into the issues of just a minute.
That was 10 important points.
Yeah, 10 important points or 10 important new issues that the NEP brought out. This talk was given by Ramesh Patnaik sir from Andhra Pradesh. Now, today, to discuss the issues of federalism and also how NEP plays out into the structures of rights of the states and the center, we have Prince Gajendra Babu sir, who will help us understand the issue better. Without taking much time, we'll straight away pass on the session to Prince Gajendra Babu sir. Then maybe we'll have a small summary of what he has to say in Hindi. Post that, we will take up the question and answer sessions. So if you have any questions and questions that you need to ask, or you feel that you need to ask for the speaker, please put it in the Facebook comment box, or as of now in the Facebook comment box, and our moderators will help us with taking the issues forward to the speaker. Gajendra Babu sir has been an educational activist. He is a member of the Secretariat of the All India Forum for Right to Education, and he is also the General Secretary for Common School Systems in Tamil Nadu. So in that sense, with a lot of experience behind his callers, I call upon Prince sir to take over the session.
Can I take some 20 minutes?
Definitely, sir. Maybe 30 to 40 minutes would be.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chairperson AFRT, Organizing Secretary, Presidium members, Secretariat members, and the host, and Shashank, who had helped me to come by 7:20, and all others. Thank you. So it's very sad position that we really do not know what is the meaning of democracy today. We are unable to understand what the government is trying to do. We are unable to understand how the message is being conveyed to the people of India. The NEP 2020 document, when we read and read, we are able to see that it is a document with a deceitful language, a language that you cannot understand, or a language that you cannot fix anything. Such a deceitful language that it is constructed, and the whole process, right from 2015, when they started the process by giving some titles for discussion. If I am correct, it is 20 for school education and 13 for higher education. They gave some 33 topics. Right from that stage, whether it is CSR committee or Kasturirangan committee, or in between the 43-page some input document, in all these documents, they talk about discussion, they talk about getting feedback from the people. We do not know who are the people. We do not know who are the 2 lakhs that they are talking about. There are several lakhs of suggestions that have gone all over India to them. So from there, we have to understand how they look at democracy. Democracy in a larger sense is giving space to understand the opinion of others. Democracy is something concerned with dialectics, where there is mutual consultation, mutual discussion, respect for the opinion of others. But in this process, in the name of mutual consultation, in the name of large grassroots level consultation, there were certain things that has happened behind the screens. We are not able to understand how the grassroots level meetings or district level meetings were held, how the signatures were secured. From that process, democracy was sabotaged at every point of time. Dr. Ambedkar, when he was introducing the draft constitution in the Constituent Assembly, had described why India will be a parliamentary democracy. I read from his collection, where the parliamentary system prevails, he's talking about England, where the parliamentary system prevails, the assessment of responsibility of the executive is both daily and periodic. The daily assessment is done by members of parliament through questions, resolutions, no confidence motion, adjournment motion, and debates on addresses. Periodic assessment is done by the electorate at the time of election, which may take place every 5 years or earlier. The daily assessment of responsibility, which is not available under the American system, it is felt far more effective than the periodic assessment and far more necessary in a country like India. The draft constitution, in recommending the parliamentary system of executive, has preferred more responsibility to more stability. Now, this draft, even according to the PIB, Public Information Bureau press release, when MHRD minister, now is the education minister, when he released to the press, the one-page press note said how many meetings that they have conducted. In that, it was stated parliamentary standing committee meeting, one day meeting, parliamentary standing committee meeting. No thorough discussion taken place in the parliament. And no state assembly had discussed this document. And in no state, there was a vibrant discussion, a transparent discussion cutting across all sections of the society. When they talk about the stakeholders, they only see the teacher, the student, the management, and to some extent the parent. When you talk about education, the real stakeholder is the society. The working class, the agricultural worker, the industrial worker, the unorganized sector worker. All these workers are the stakeholders in the education field. Their opinion is very important. They are the one who are building the society, who are building this nation. So they aspire for their children. We need to know what is their aspiration. They have a plan to design pedagogy. They have certain ideas to build schools and colleges. See, in Tamil Nadu, it was the scheduled caste people who offered land to certain institutions for starting the primary school. So it was the working class, the oppressed class in the society, which wanted schools. They gave their land. And India has got such a big history. So when you talk about discussion, when they talk about democracy, where did you discuss? Whose opinion did you take into consideration? Is a very important question. I would like to quote another thing before going into this document. He talks about the directive principles. The draft constitution as framed only provides a missionary for the government of the country. It is not a contrivance to install any particular party in power, as has been done in some countries. Who should be in power is left to be determined by the people, as it must be. if the system is to satisfy the test of democracy. But whoever captures power will not be free to do what he likes with it. In the exercise of it, he will have to respect these instruments of instruction, which are called directive principles. He cannot ignore them. He may not have to answer for the breach in a court of law, but he will certainly have to answer for them before the electorate at election time. The next sentence is very important. What great value these directive principle possesses will be realized better when the forces of right contrive to capture power. This is spoken in 1948. It has no binding force, is no argument against their inclusion in the Constitution. Now, he says the government has to answer to the people, the government has to discuss in the parliament, and the parliamentarians are there to question the government, get the answer on behalf of the people. And that is how the Constituent Assembly is constructing the parliamentary democracy. In evolving this policy, the entire process negated the parliamentary democracy. The latest assault is from the School Education Secretary, Union of India. He writes a letter to the State Secretary by saying the State Secretary should help the teachers and principals. He should facilitate through the diets, SCRTs, for dissemination of the policy, and they should give suggestions to the government for the implementation process. The states have not decided whether they are going to agree with the policy or not. The parliament has not discussed. The state assemblies have not discussed. But the Union Secretary is writing to the Secretary of the state government to receive suggestions for implementation process. This policy, if it has to come into effect, there may be a necessity for a fundamental change in the Constitution itself, because this policy is paving path for moving education from concurrent list to the union list. Many of the acts that has been passed by many state legislatures will become infructuous. When it becomes infructuous, no more power will be there with the state to make new laws as far as education is concerned. A policy which is going to have such a far-reaching effect is not discussed in the parliament, is not discussed in the assembly, it is not discussed in the state cabinets, but still the implementation process is starting. So it is nothing but sabotaging democracy. Is that only the sabotaging? Any space for the teacher or the student to express his views? You have Lindo Commission, you have many commissions which said that there should be a union. Does the document talk anywhere a democratic space for a student or a teacher to discuss the policy? Any policy, it may be economic policy, it may be agriculture policy, it may be industrial policy, it may be environmental policy. There is an academic freedom, and that is why we come to university. That is why we come to college. We come here to discuss. Albert Einstein says, one who has the privilege to know has the duty to act. Now the people who come to the universities, college, they have the privilege, they have access to knowledge. Once they have access to knowledge, they deliberate. And there should be a space. But entire document speaks about three words. One is occasion. The other one is professional education. The third one is technical education. All general education will have occasional component. So what is the idea of this entire NEP 2020? Entire idea of NEP 2020 is to switch off the democratic space, remove the democratic space in any institution, You are born. If you want to live, you have to eat. If you want to eat, you need money. If you want money, you have to work. To work, you need a skill. They are talking about vocational skill for an upper primary student. He is supposed to go to a workyard for 10 days internship to become well aware of the trade. A boy or girl who is well aware of a trade, who gets interested in a profession, who is attracted towards an occupation, can you expect them to concentrate in the academic activities and come up in the general education? And if at all they come for the general education, there are checks everywhere where you don't allow the child to express himself or herself. It is a tight compartment. See, the age between 9, that is 16 years, 14 years to 18 years, 9th standard, 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard. This is the age where the child develops various qualities. It confronts the physical development in the body. It confronts the mental development. And it is trying to understand the society. It is trying to fit into the society through its peer group. So many difficulties are there for every child during this age. But you place the child in a tight compartment without giving any democratic space for any discussion. You are asked to choose whether you are going to go into a particular subject in the higher education. You have to select a paper, whether it is a level A paper or level B paper. One is a general paper, other one is an advanced paper. If you do not take advanced paper, then what will happen? You cannot pursue that subject in the higher education. And after 15 years of age, I do not have any opportunity to say that I have this talent, I have acquired this knowledge, so I want to pursue my studies in this particular field. I cannot say. Who will say? The NTA will say. NTA will say. The college cannot say that you are fit to be admitted into this college based on your qualification. The college, university cannot say. The university has to rely upon the NTA score. The board of governors, they talk about the board of governors. Is it a democratic process? If it is a democratic process, as Shashank was talking about an individual's interview, a working class representative should be there in the board of governors. There should be an agricultural worker, not just a landlord, an agricultural worker. But here in the board of governors, who are going to come and sit, it is not the heads of institutions, whom we call here now Senate, Syndicate, Executive Council, etc. Now this board of governors is something different, where the corporates will be there. The philanthropy has to come. The private players will be encouraged. So when the private players come, when the market comes, I have to act only according to the needs of the market. I can do research only at the command of the government or at the command of the market. I have to understand today there is novel coronavirus issue. So what is my interest? The government needs vaccine. So what I should do? I should only concentrate in research concerning production of vaccine. If I am a mechanical engineer, I should contribute in some way in producing equipments. I cannot take up a research to say why the migrant labor walked thousands of miles, why the migrant laborers died, why hundreds of deaths that has taken place due to this travel. So it is not only due to virus, but due to the lockdown, the death has, how the lockdown has caused the death. So this is also an important part of research. This is also an important part of education. But the National Research Foundation doesn't give space for that. Democracy is that I should choose. I should choose. When evaluating, who will evaluate? How it should be evaluated? The difficulty level of a student has to be evaluated. When you take the school education evaluation, a child comes from a discriminatory social order. When a child leaves the school The school should evaluate whether the child has acquired strength, knowledge to oppose the discriminatory social order. The child should feel that there is a equitable space. I can build an equitable society. That is the real evaluation. But here you are talking about the skill. So what is a skill? The market needed skill. And in the primary sections, it is only literacy and numeracy. It is literacy and numeracy. We are not talking about literacy. Literacy means you should know the letters. We are not concerned about literacy alone. We are concerned about education. Education is something different from literacy. Education, you are deconstructing knowledge and reconstructing knowledge. That is education. This document is for literacy, and this document is not for educating people. It will give you literacy, it will give computer literacy, it will give technical literacy, it will give occasional literacy, it will make you a skilled labor. There is no space here for any kind of a constitutional efforts, either by the student or by the teacher. So what is the purpose of this NEP? The purpose of the NEP is to demolish the democratic institutions and democratic space. Now today, to some extent, universities are democratic institutions. And the universities are incorporated, regulated, and administered by the state governments. And such universities are functioning very well. It has produced excellent people in different parts who are working in different parts of this world, different fields. But this document takes away the power from the state government and gives entire power to the National Regulatory Authority of India, which will be under the National, that is Higher Education Commission of India. See, even the courts will not have the power. The Higher Education Council of India will arbitrate if there is problem or issues between the 4 vertical columns that will be functioning under the Higher Education Commission of India. So the tribunalization, what you are talking about WTO, under WTO GATS, the starting point of that tribunalization you can find in this document. When you want to make so many legislations to implement this policy, where is the discussion with the parliamentarians? The PIB statement says it has discussed with the parliamentarian of few states. What about the rest of the states? And what is the actual conversation between the MPs and the minister? What did the MPs say? How far the comments of the MPs or suggestions of the MPs have been taken? There is no mention about that in any document. So this, the entire process is a very dangerous process. It is literally moving towards a dictatorship. It is literally moving India from a parliamentary form of federal form of constitution to a unitary form of constitution, where you cannot question a leader, where you cannot, questioning a leader, questioning the policy is something different from challenging a state. See, I can question the policy of the government. I have every right. The constitution gives me right to question the policy of the government. Today you may say one policy is good, tomorrow you may say this policy is bad. That is questioning the policy, debating on the policy. How can debating the policy and saying no to a policy become anti-national, anti-state? So there is a clear distinction between what is challenging a state and what is challenging the policy of the government. That is democracy. But here, there is no discussion in the parliament, there is no discussion in the public forum, and you say, I am giving this policy, you implement the policy. If you talk, you are talking against the interest of the nation. Whose interest? The interest of the nation means the migrant labor who walked, the child, the girl who had her father in the rear of the cycle, who she pedaled all the way from Delhi to her home, to her village. Her interest is very important. Is her interest reflected in the policy? So we don't have such kind of a representation. We don't have such kind of a discussion. And now what you are trying to do, you want to make all the single schools. You say a single school is an isolated school. The teacher is isolated. If teacher is isolated, what you should do? You should conduct seminars. You should make the teachers come together. In colleges, we have department level seminar, college level seminar, university level. These are the democratic spaces. Like that, you create democratic spaces for the teachers. But here you say there will be a school complex, and the school complex will share the resources. The teachers will go from one school to other. Is it democracy? Is it really strengthening? Is it bringing the teacher out of? You are only giving more stress on the teacher. The teacher will not have full freedom to understand the background of every child, to understand the social condition of a child, to discuss with the child. Where will the time for the teacher? Where will the time for the child to prepare herself or himself to negotiate in the class, to discuss in the class? So very a serious issue is that they are demolishing right from Anganwadi up to post-doctoral, whatever institutional safeguards that you have, those safeguards will be taken away. Anybody can be peer reviewed, anybody can be peer assessed, and for anything, anybody can be victimized, can be removed, can be sent out of the school. There is no guarantee at all. You have to perform your output method. What is output method? In a school or college, you spend money. You do not know who will become what. You do not know a person who he may become a social scientist or an economist. You cannot say. You are giving equal opportunity for all children. You have to spend for every child equally. So any child can become anything. It depends upon all the conditions, the environment. See, it is not only geography, it is also domicile. It is not only economic condition, the social condition, within the social condition, the family condition. So everyone has to be treated as an individual, and every individual has got a potential, and every individual has got his or her own aspirations, views. And this document just says market needs you. This document says the government needs you. So according to the needs of the government, you get yourself trained. According to the needs of the market, you get yourself trained. That is sabotaging democracy. That itself is sabotaging democracy. I may become a PhD. I know a person who is a BE engineer. He studied in a private college, but he was driving auto. In the conversation, I asked him, you studied BE? You are driving auto? He said, yes, I studied BE. My occupation is auto driving. What is that? Just because I studied BE, should I not drive an auto? I have a good income in that. Then why did you say? I wanted to know what is the mechanics of this auto. For that I studied engineering. When I get an opportunity, I may become an automobile industry. I may start my own factory, my own unit. So working is something different. Getting education is something different. Getting a degree is something different. Just because I get a degree, it doesn't mean I should go and sit only in that particular place. There was another worker who was studying MA in a college. I asked him, what are you doing? He said, I'm studying MA. I asked him, what you are going to do? See, only when I go to an university, when I study, I read constitution. I study about the history, study about the sociology. I can come here and I can discuss with all my colleagues, co-workers. Then only we can understand how this government is functioning. So coming to a university is to get the knowledge. Coming to university is for social development. Coming to a university is for the development of the nation as a whole, humanity, building up the humanness in the people. It is not dehumanizing people. This document is dehumanizing the people. It says that if you are a human, you will be questioning. You need not be a human. You be like a dog. You be like a cow or whatever may be. Because you need food, you need shelter, you need clothing. But a human is not like that. Human, Article 21 says, life with dignity. Life which Supreme Court has said, interpreted in many cases, said it is not an animal existence. It is a life with dignity. What is life with dignity? You may be a very rich person. Even if you are a very rich person, it is not that you should go and beg with your father or mother for your education. The government has to, that is life with dignity. You may be a very poor person. You need not be for the philanthropy of others. That is what the Constitution guarantees. Article 14 guarantees. Article 21 guarantees. What does Article 41 say? Article 41 says the economic capacity the state develops. The state has to provide education. Now you say it is 5 trillion economy. Now you said that you are going to become economic superpower. If that is the case, then according to the directive principles, Article 41, state has to produce. But what are you saying here? Here you are talking about philanthropic efforts, whether it is a public sector or it's a private sector. The private players, they have to be non-profit, philanthropic. I do not know who is non-profit and who is philanthropic today in the present circumstances, and how many institutions that is not non-profit or not philanthropic you are going to remove. But this document clearly says you can generate surplus. After generating the surplus, you can reinvest. You can invest in somewhere, some other place. You are allowing the foreign universities to come here. And you are going to operate on digital mode. You say you are going to bring 2 crore people, the children who are left out, 2 crore children who are left out into the system. How are you going to bring? By the digital mode. The document says there will be a national open school, Institute for Open School, which will conduct 3rd standard exam, A, B, C. A is equal to 3rd standard, B is equal to 5th standard, C is equal to 8th standard. 21st century, first educational policy is talking about a 3rd standard child staying at some place. This document will not take school to that place. The child has to read online. Is it a child right? It is violation of child right. It is violation of equitable access to education. It is killing democracy. It is not strengthening democracy. Only when the child comes into the classroom, the child will move with other children. It will learn what democracy. It will learn practically what democracy is. That how to understand fellow students, how to interact with the fellow students, how to move, accommodating the views and other things of the fellow students. But this says, you state, that means what? Indirectly encouraging child labor. Because they have already brought an amendment to the Child Labor Abolition Act, where they said that a child can work in the family enterprises. A child can work in the entertainment industry. So you have made provisions for that. Now the child will be engaged in a family entertainment, and the child will learn online, and you will say 2 crore people are brought into the system. Is it not mockery on democracy? It is not just abusing. So when such a document which has got a very far-reaching, now you have an Anganwadi, now you have an elected representative. You say the elected representative, that is a local body representative, I'm talking about MLA and MP, a ward councillor. He brings the child to the school, he brings the child to the Anganwadi. And there are local initiatives taken by various sections of the people to bring the child into the school. But you are saying you need not come to the school, you stay where? Say wherever you are. And you say there are different types of schools will be there. Different types of preschools will be there. There will be a play school, there will be a preschool, there will be Anganwadi. There will be Anganwadi in the middle school. And who will be a teacher? The Anganwadi worker will become a teacher by undergoing 6 months online course. How can a person become a teacher by undergoing a 6 months online course without a practical, physical classroom interaction? Nobody knows. And there will be another school, a preschool or play school, a paid school. There will be a trained teacher. And is it an equitable access? There is inequality at the day. You are that inequality and you are still multiplying that inequality. So the entire document, as far as I am concerned, is demolishing every institutions that for the past 5 years we have constructed. For the past 50 years we have constructed. Every institution that has come out because of the 200-year, 2-century social justice struggle that started even before Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, It intensified during Mahatma Jyotirao Phule and it spread all over India. It was Ayangali in Kerala, Narayana Guru in Kerala, and it was Ayodhidasa Pandita Tandai Periyar in Tamil Nadu. It was Baba Sahib Ambedkar, we can't say in Maharashtra, for the entire world we should say. He fought not only for the people who are oppressed in India, he fought for the people who are oppressed in any part of the world, whether it's in Africa, Asia, America, whichever oppressed section, he wanted to uplift the oppressed section. You had Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and you had many personalities like that. And the occasion is different from helping the child to learn the dignity of labor. Helping the child to learn the dignity of labor is something different to making a child labor. This document is not helping the child to understand the dignity of labor. This document is aiming to convert a child into a child labor. So now you are not respecting the parliament, you are not respecting the state legislative assembly, you are demolishing the parliamentary democracy. You are sabotaging the parliamentary democracy. The executive level, I do not know whether all the ministers of the Council of Ministers were present when the cabinet decision was taken. We are not sure about that because after 2 days it was said some ministers were not there due to some reasons. And all the state ministers, they have not decided. Even without a state cabinet deciding this national education policy, you want to implement that policy. You are killing democracy at the executive level. At the judicial level, you have a master plan in that to tribunalize the entire judiciary. That is, hereafter, we do not know whether we'll be able to approach the High Court or Supreme Court or whatever court right away under the provisions of the Constitution of India. We may be forced to go to the tribunal. Only after the tribunal decides, finally we may be given chance to go to a court. So at all these three areas, you have sabotaged the democracy. And now finally, in the media, what kind of a space you have for discussing, except for the few articles that comes in the English media, and that too in a few print and very few electronic media. Otherwise, there is no discussion anywhere about the far-reaching effects of this policy. The teachers' organizations have not been invited for discussion, whether at the school level or at the college level, even at the institutional level. They have invited a selected teachers and selected discussions have taken place. The role of the state government, the role of the minorities in building the education, the role of local bodies. If you want to decentralize, you have to go to the state and then you have to go still down to the local body. But here, everything will be centralized. The entire document, everything will be centralized. The decision-making power, the rule-making power, the law enacting power, everything will be with the union government, central government. And all the people, whether it is a state government or the local body, they will be the implementing agencies. Of 1920, which became an act of 1920, where the Montague-Chelmsford Reformation introduced the diarchy. In the diarchy, you had a governor and you had an elected representative, the government, elected government. The governor had the authority and the government had the responsibility. Now it is a model diarchy where the central government is going to have all the powers and the state governments are going to have all the responsibilities. The power will be with one people, responsibility will be with the other people. So they will become implementing agents. Baba Sahib in 1949 said that states cannot be reduced as municipalities. Today, at least municipalities have certain rights. Now this policy takes away even the rights of the municipalities. It is the states are being reduced as just not even as a municipality, just as a agents for implementing the policy that is being evolved by the central government. So the parliamentary democracy is in danger. Indian democracy, which celebrates unity in diversity, is in danger. The multicultural India is in danger. The entire document is for Sanskritization. Entire document is for moving towards a unitary form of government. I hope the discussion, whether it is a 4-year, whether it is a 3-year, whether it is a university or college, all these structural changes are aimed towards an establishment of a unitary form of government. So that is a greater danger. I hope we have to discuss this policy even in that plane. With this, I wish to submit myself for any further discussion.
Thank you so much, sir, for bringing our notice to various issues involved, including a tribunalization of education that I believe, in my at least readings, have not been engaged with. A few thoughts around it. The first thing was how schooling as a democratic space or a space for socialization of children in the younger years must have played out has now been put under threat. Apart from that, you have also noted about the Child Labor Abolition Act and how it was amended and how this national education policy might feed into it. Now, not taking much of time, I'll ask Ramamurthy sir to help us with summarizing your speech into Hindi for our Hindi viewers.
नमस्कार, लाल सलाम, जय भीम सभी को। मैं मुख्य रूप से जो इन्होंने बिंदु कहे हैं उनको उनका एक तरह सार पेश करने की कोशिश करता हूं। मुख्य रूप से गजेंद्र सर ने ये बताने की कोशिश की है कि कुल लबो-लबाब अगर इस नीति का हमको इस नई एजुकेशन नीति का निकालना हो तो ये है कि ये लोकतंत्र के विध्वंस का दस्तावेज है कि लोकतंत्र को कैसे विध्वंस किया जाए, लोकतंत्र को कैसे नष्ट किया जाए, उसका डॉक्यूमेंट है। इसके अलावा इसमें कुछ भी नहीं है। इस बात को स्थापित करने के लिए उन्होंने कई स्तरों पे कई तरह के एग्जाम्पल उदाहरण दिए, जिनमें से मैं कुछ को लेके आपसे इसको स्पष्ट करने की कोशिश करते हैं। पहले तो पूरी प्रक्रिया के संदर्भ में उन्होंने ये उदाहरण दिया कि जैसा कि ये दावा किया गया कि हमने 2 लाख लोगों से बात की है, लेकिन ये कोई नहीं बता रहा कि ये 2 लाख लोग कौन हैं जिनसे बात की। 33 सवाल पूछे गए थे 1915 में, जिसमें 20 स्कूल एजुकेशन के बारे में थे और 13 जो है उच्च शिक्षा के बारे में थे। लेकिन लोगों ने क्या रिस्पॉन्स दिए, कहाँ पे कंसल्टेशन हुआ, कहाँ पे विचार विमर्श हुआ, उसके बारे में कुछ भी नहीं बताया गया। फिर दूसरी बात उन्होंने बताई प्रक्रिया के बारे में कि 29 जुलाई को जब ये कैबिनेट ने अप्रूव किया तो प्रेस इंफॉर्मेशन ब्यूरो में जो एक प्रेस नोट जारी किया गया उसमें ये कहा गया कि कुछ राज्यों के सांसदों से बात हुई, कुछ जगह पे पार्लियामेंट्री सिलेक्ट कमेटी ने इस पर बात की और कुछ जगह पे राज्य में अलग अलग जगह चर्चा की गई, लेकिन ऐसा कोई विस्तृत हमें इसकी जानकारी नहीं दी जाती कि वो आखिर कौन से पार्लियामेंटेरियन थे, कौन से सांसद थे जिनसे बात की गई और उन्होंने इसके बारे में क्या कहा। तो ये उन्होंने दूसरा उदाहरण दिया कि ये किस अलोकतांत्रिक तरीके से इसको जो है वो इस प्रक्रिया को चलाया गया। और तीसरा सबसे बड़ा उदाहरण जो उन्होंने अलग अलग बातों से कहा, जिसका सार ये है कि ये बिल्कुल संवैधानिक परंपरा के खिलाफ है। संवैधानिक परंपरा ये है कि कैबिनेट की मंजूरी के बाद, मंत्रिमंडल की मंजूरी के बाद ऐसा दस्तावेज जो है संसद के पास उसकी स्वीकृति और उसमें चर्चा के लिए जाता है, लेकिन यहाँ पे संसद में कोई बात नहीं की गई। उल्टा ये कहा गया ऑफिशियली कि जिन मुद्दों में वित्तीय प्रावधान शामिल नहीं है उन्हें हम लागू करने की कोशिश करेंगे। अन्य शब्दों में कि संसद में बिना चर्चा किए गए इसको लागू करना बिल्कुल असंवैधानिक है और संविधान की परंपराओं के बिल्कुल खिलाफ है। दूसरा, गजेंद्र सर ने एक बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण बात कही कि अगर इसको पूरी तरह से लागू किया जाता है जिस रूप में अभी भी ये है, तो उसका मतलब है कि बहुत सारे जो है कानून बनाए जाएंगे, बहुत सारे विधेयक लाए जाएंगे, जिन विधेयकों का कुल मिला के सारांश ये होगा कि इन विधेयकों के माध्यम से आप जो ये शिक्षा का विषय इसे संवर्ती सूची में से हटाकर मुख्य रूप से आप इसको केंद्रीय सूची में लाने का प्रयास करेंगे और राज्यों की जितनी भी शक्तियां इस बारे में है वो लगभग रिडेंडेंट निरस्त या इसको कहें कि निष्क्रिय हो जाएंगे। उनका होना ना होना एक ही बात होगी। और इसी बात को अंत में उन्होंने कहने के लिए जो बहुत सुंदर दूसरा उदाहरण दिया कि इसको हम ऐसे ही समझ सकते हैं कि जैसे मॉन्टेस्क्यू चेम्सफोर्ड सुधारों के बाद जो दोहरी प्रशासनिक व्यवस्था जिसे हम डायरकी कहते थे वो आई थी, जिसमें शक्ति किसी के पास होती थी और काम करने की जिम्मेदारी किसी के पास होती थी। तो यही मॉडल आने वाला है कि काम से राज्य करेंगे लेकिन असली अथॉरिटी जो है वो केंद्र के पास होगी। तो ये इस तरह से इसको बिल्कुल उन्होंने अलोकतांत्रिक करने का प्रयास किया है। तो अन्य बहुत सारे उदाहरणों से उन्होंने इसी बात को बहरहाल उभारने की कोशिश की इसके विभिन्न प्रावधानों के माध्यम से। खासतौर पे कुछ प्रावधान जिनका मुझे लगता है कि हमें उल्लेखनीय रूप से ध्यान लेना चाहिए कि ये किस तरह से जैसे उन्होंने एक उदाहरण दिया कि अभी जो केंद्र के शिक्षा सचिव हैं अमित कारी, उन्होंने एक चिट्ठी जारी की जिसमें ये कहा गया राज्य सरकारों के शिक्षा सचिवों को कि वो डाइट, SCRT, क्लस्टर वगैरह के माध्यम से शिक्षकों में इस बात का प्रसार करें कि उन्हें इस नीति को लागू करना है। और ये नहीं कहा कि इस नीति के ऊपर चर्चा करनी, उन्हें लागू करना है। और अगर कोई उनका सुझाव है तो उसको वो मेरे ख्याल से बहुत ही कम समय में देने को कहा गया, जितने देर तक वो शिक्षकों तक पत्र पहुंचेगा भी नहीं। शायद 27 अगस्त या कोई ऐसी डेट कही गई है जिसका मतलब ये है। तो जिसका मतलब ये है कि आप टीचरों को या जो शिक्षक संगठन है या समूचा ढांचा है उसे शिक्षा नीति के बनाने में शामिल नहीं करना चाहते, बल्कि उसे एक अपने मशीन के पुर्जे की तरह उससे वो लागू करवाना चाहते हैं। उसमें आप ये नहीं चाहते कि लोगों की किसी भी स्तर पे भागीदारी हो। ये एक उन्होंने महत्वपूर्ण इसके बारे में उदाहरण दिया। दूसरा उन्होंने इसके बारे में ये भी उदाहरण दिया कि इसके बहुत सारे प्रावधान, बहुत जैसे 4 साल का जो अंडर ग्रेजुएशन प्रोग्राम है या फिर उसके साथ वैकल्पिक रूप से 3 साल का अंडर ग्रेजुएशन प्रोग्राम है, ये सारे मुख्य रूप से अलोकतांत्रिकता की तरफ बढ़ने वाले स्टेप हैं, क्योंकि इनके द्वारा आप जो है जो बहुजन है उनको बहिष्कृत करेंगे, उनको बाहर निकालेंगे और 4 साल वही लोग पढ़ सकते हैं जिनके पास पैसा होगा या वो बाहर जाने वाली जगहों पे जा सकते हैं। फिर एक बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण उदाहरण है जो सभी के लिए चिंताजनक है कि जो बोर्ड ऑफ गवर्नर का प्रावधान इस NEP में सुझाया गया है उसकी संरचना इस तरह से है कि जिसमें सरकार अपनी मर्जी के लोगों को लाएगी। डेफिनेटली जो उनकी राजनीतिक पसंद होंगे, जो कारपोरेट या निगमित जगत से होंगे या ऐसे लोग जो सरकार अपनी मर्जी से चाहेगी। कहने का मतलब ये है कि आज की तारीख में सिंडिकेट, सेनेट, EC मतलब एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल या अकादमिक काउंसिल जिसमें शिक्षक और विद्यार्थी भी एक चुने हुए प्रतिनिधियों के रूप में भाग होते हैं, ये सारी इकाइयां खत्म हो जाएंगी और इनमें मतलब इन वर्गों की, शिक्षकों की या विद्यार्थियों की या अभिभावकों की कोई भी से नहीं होगी। अगर वो इन क्षेत्रों के मतलब शिक्षक विद्यार्थियों में से कुछ लोगों को रखेंगे तो वो चुनिंदा अपनी पसंद के कुछ लोगों को रखेंगे जिनको वो पसंद करते हैं, जिनसे वो एक अपने किसी भी प्रस्ताव का अनुमोदन ले सकते हैं। तो उनका ये कहना है कि ये बोर्ड ऑफ गवर्नर का प्रस्ताव बहुत ही खतरनाक है। दूसरा एक और उन्होंने बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण अलोकतंत्रीकरण की तरफ जो इशारा किया वो ये है कि इसकी न्यायिक शक्तियां भी मुख्य रूप से जो है वो हायर एजुकेशन काउंसिल को दी जाने वाली है, जिसका मतलब ये होगा कि जो शिक्षा से जुड़े हायर एजुकेशन या इवन स्कूल शिक्षा से जुड़े बहुत सारे मुद्दे हैं उनका या तो ट्रिब्यूनलीकरण किया जाएगा, वो अलग अलग जो उसी काउंसिल के अंतर्गत काम करने वाले ट्रिब्यूनल हैं उनके तक जाएंगे, या केवल जो हायर एजुकेशन काउंसिल है, उच्च शिक्षा परिषद है, वही एक अंतिम आर्बिट्रेटरी अथॉरिटी, अंतिम मतलब न्यायिक इकाई के रूप में होगी, जो कि जिससे कि शिक्षकों और विद्यार्थियों, खासतौर पर शिक्षकों की जो सेवा शर्तों के संदर्भ में अधिकार हैं या उनके अपने आप को संगठित करने के अधिकार हैं, इस तरह के सारे अधिकार पूरी तरह या तो समाप्त ही हो जाएंगे या फिर बिल्कुल वो रिडेंडेंट या निष्क्रियता की कगार पर आ जाएंगे। तो कुल मिला के अगर बहुत ही संक्षेप में कहें तो उन्होंने ये कहने की कोशिश की कि ये समूची प्रक्रिया, इस समूची एजुकेशन नीति, शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत अन्य चीजों के अलावा ये एक तरफ बहुत स्पष्ट संकेत है कि निवर्तमान जो सरकार है या जो अभी का जिसे हम कहते हैं कि रिजीम है, इसके अंतर्गत हम तानाशाही की तरफ एक और आगे कदम बढ़े हैं, तानाशाही स्थापना की और एक कदम और आगे बढ़े हैं। इसे हमें सिर्फ शिक्षा को अकेले नहीं बाकी जीवन के बड़े अन्य इकाइयों के संदर्भ में भी देखना चाहिए। उद्योग है, वित्त है, रेलवे है वगैरह। और ये तानाशाही इसलिए है क्योंकि हम एक तरह से लगातार इस बात की ओर कोशिश करते हैं कि हम ये मतलब सरकार ये कोशिश कर रही है कि वो एक जो फेडरल या संघात्मक संविधान है उसे एकात्मक या यूनिटरी संविधान के रूप में परिवर्तित करे, उसकी तरफ बढ़ता हुआ ये एक और कदम है। जिस तरह से इन्होंने हर एक संस्था को, जो संवैधानिक संस्थान है जिसमें चाहे इलेक्शन कमीशन, चुनाव आयोग है, न्यायपालिका है या मंत्रिमंडल भी कुछ हद तक कह सकते हैं, संसद है, संसद की जो अलग अलग कमेटियां हैं, जो संसद की स्थायी समितियां होती हैं, इन सबको जिस तरह से उन्होंने नजरअंदाज या निष्क्रिय बना दिया है या उनको लगभग खत्म कर दिया है, तो उससे हम जो है बिल्कुल लोकतंत्र के भारत में ध्वंस के किनारे पे खड़े हो गए हैं, इसके विघटन के किनारे खड़े हो गए हैं, जिसके बाद एक ऐसा अंधेरा छाने वाला है जिसमें हमें एक डेमोक्रेटिक अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म या लोकतांत्रिक अधिकारवाद या लोकतांत्रिक तानाशाही देखने को मिलेगी। इसलिए हमें सचेत होने की जरूरत है और इसके बारे में हमें निश्चित रूप से सक्रिय होकर इस बात के प्रयास करने चाहिए और रणनीति बनानी चाहिए कि इसको हम कैसा रोक सकते हैं। तो मोटे मोटे तौर पे सर ने इन उदाहरणों को कहा। बीच में अंत में क्योंकि मुझे अभी ये सारांश रूप में पेश करना था, सर ने बाबा साहब भीमराव अंबेडकर जी के कुछ बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण जो है कथन उद्धृत किए, जिसमें उन्होंने ये बताया कि वो पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम जो है, अमेरिका का जो पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम है उससे कैसे बेहतर है, और जैसे कि लोकतंत्र मतलब पार्लियामेंट्री संसदीय प्रणाली में रोजमर्रा के आधार पे जो एग्जीक्यूटिव कार्यपालिका उसकी जवाबदेही तय हो सकती है, जो अमेरिकन प्रणाली में नहीं हो सकता। और दूसरा अंत में उन्होंने बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण ये बात कही कि महात्मा ज्योतिराव फूले, बाबा साहब भीमराव अंबेडकर, पेरियार, नारायण गुरु और इस तरह के बहुत ही सारे हमारे जो समाज सुधारक थे, जिनकी कोशिशों की वजह से हमने संघर्ष करते हुए काफी सारे संस्थानों को कुछ हद तक हासिल किया था, उनमें लोकतांत्रिकता लाई थी, वो लोकतांत्रिकता आज खत्म होने जा रही है। तो आज का ये संघर्ष केवल शिक्षा नीति का संघर्ष नहीं है, बल्कि लोकतंत्र को बचाने का संघर्ष है और अपने लोकतांत्रिक तानाशाही को रोकने का संघर्ष है, जिसके लिए हमें प्रतिबद्ध होकर लड़ने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, Ramurthy sir, for translating it for us. Before we move, I think it's the right time for us to probably ask out our questions and discuss with the speaker on what we think around the issue that he spoke about today. In that sense, I'll use my privilege of being the moderator and put him into one more question before I could take up anybody else's. Sir, building upon my dissertation work around the issue of higher education, constitution and financial aspects, one thing I have noted is while the constitution envisages that education must largely be state subject, in practice, JP Nayak has noted for a long time now that in practice it has been a concurrent subject, or largely so a union's play at work. So in that sense, what are your thoughts? How is it different this time? Second one, we have also seen how judiciary has played an important role in regulating higher education in India, be it through the St. Stephen's College case, or be it Miss Mohini Jain case, Uni Krishnan case, and many other cases, not just into the issue of financing, but also the rights of the students, the midday meal schemes, or be it plethora of smaller issues within the sector of education itself. So what do we see today? What can we expect around the tribunalization of education that you were speaking around? Can you please elaborate on it?
Yeah, sure. When I am talking, kindly permit me to switch off the video also to talk, because my bandwidth is very low.
Definitely.
Whenever my bandwidth here shows low, I'll switch off the video, then it becomes all right. I
Sure.
don't know. I'm not about familiar with the technologies. I'm using it. Right now, the question that you asked me is true. Even when education was in state list, that is list 2 of the 7th schedule, still there was entry 66 in list 1. Entry 66 in list 1 talks about setting up of standards and coordinating in higher education. That entry was there even when it was in the state list. Now, from the state list, it has moved to the concurrent list. It has not moved to the union list. When it is in the concurrent list, then it means that the state and the center have to concur in doing something. And if the state says this law is not fit for me, then I can try to adopt as I feel that is convenient. That flexibility is there in the constitution. If you say even in the concurrent list, only the central government has the power and no power for the state government, then you don't need a concurrent list at all. You can have only 2 lists. One is a union list, another state list. Now, it is in the concurrent list. Now, one example what I can say, in 1968, based on the Kothari Commission report, 10+2 was introduced. When you say 10+2, that means 1 year you are taking from school education and 1 year you are taking from the pre-university, PUC, which was under the university. And you are now introducing an intermediate in between the school and the college. Now, many states in India, they introduced intermediate in the colleges. Some states in India started a new college, what they called as junior college. In Tamil Nadu, they worked out a plan. They saw when you want to start it in a college, the number of colleges available in 1968 was far less. If you want to start a junior college, you need investment. So they decided, the then government decided that the intermediate may be introduced as a course, higher secondary course under the school education department. So it became a +2 under school education department. At that point of time, we had a high school for every 5 kilometers. Whichever high school had good infrastructure, that high school was upgraded as a higher secondary school and ensured that for every 7 kilometers, for every 1 kilometer, there was a primary school. For every 3 kilometers, there was a middle school. For every 5 kilometers, there was a high school. And for every 7 kilometers, there was a higher secondary school. So most of the students who got through 10th standard, who passed 10th standard, they were admitted into the higher secondary course and they reached the college. That is why in 2018-19, Tamil Nadu's gross enrollment ratio in higher education was 49%, whereas national average was 26%. The 2020 documents aims to make 50% in 2035. Tamil Nadu is 15 years ahead. So that is how the states use the provisions in the constitution to make their own colleges. In Tamil Nadu, we can say that every college, every district, or even every taluk in most of the districts has an arts and science college. I am talking about the government college. I am not talking about Gujarat, where for 13 years a chief minister could not even open a single fully funded government state medical college. It was all a private public partnership. But in Tamil Nadu, we started government colleges, and 80% of the districts in Tamil Nadu today has a government medical college. Government medical college. I am including those that has been sanctioned in the last year, that has opened this year. So these are some of the things that we are able to do when we are having the states having certain rights under the constitution. These rights are being now taken away by the center with this policy. Hereafter, according to entry 32 of list 2, the state has the regulating power. That power, that is what I told, certain constitutional provision, the basic structure itself may be amended to implement this policy. Without amending, they cannot implement. If they are going to implement without amending, that means they are not respecting the constitution. They don't care for the constitution. I do not know how it will be possible. So such larger implications are there. What is your second part of the question?
Supreme Court's role and tribunalization.
Yeah. See, for every, suppose a student is not given an application as on date. Suppose 5th is the last date. I am not given application. I got a demand draft on 5th. I went to the counter on 5th. But the counter person said the admission is already closed. Application says it's already closed. You cannot get an application. Now I rush with the demand draft to the High Court. I will invoke Article 14 of the Constitution. I will talk about the right to equality. I say all those persons who have got a demand draft on that date, who are present at 5 o'clock in the counter, should be given the application form. If there is any violation in the rule of the college or the university, the court will see whether the rule is in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. If the rule set by the university or college is not in accordance with the Constitution, the court will strike down the rule and say that this boy should be issued the application. But when you go to the tribunal, you cannot expect the same thing. And you do not know how the tribunal laws, tribunal structure is going to be established. So all the facilities that you have in a court of law, the same kind of a facility, will it be available with the tribunal, is a big question mark. And that is why we say the court's roles should not be reduced. The writ power of the court is to protect the rights of the fundamental rights, the basic structure of the Constitution, the basic structure of the Constitution, the fundamental right has to be protected. Then the courts must have its power to adjudicate, and it should not be at the mercy of the tribunals. And after crossing the tribunals means the life of the student will end, the life of the parent will end. After crossing that age, what is the use of getting justice? Justice delayed is justice denied. And that is why we see a danger that high courts and Supreme Courts may lose the power to adjudicate when there is a provision for a tribunal to decide before they approach the court.
Thank you so much, sir. I request if anybody on the meeting here has any questions, they can raise their hand so that we can ask the speaker about it. We have 1 or 2 questions from the Facebook comment sections that we have got. Nachimuttamani is asking, is it possible to implement the merit-based appointments and admissions without amendments in constitutions of India and throw away the policy of reservation? Ramakrishna has noted, when the Gazette itself can be amended from time to time according to the situation or period, even education can be implemented and revised from time to time. And what is the issue with it? Any thoughts around these 2 points?
You want to add some more questions to that? If it is connected, I can say it to save time.
Nachimuthumani has again noted only 4 persons were invited to share their suggestions from Tamil Nadu. And I think these are the questions as of now.
Fine. Now, many argue that reservation is provided by the Constitution and nobody can overrule the reservation. You will be seeing one case pending from Uttar Pradesh regarding PG NEET admission where OBC reservation was not followed. Citing that pending case, for several years, OBC seats were not filled in the PG NEET admission process, postgraduate medical admission process. You would have read in the papers about a case in the Supreme Court which was sent back to the High Court. Now High Court has given a direction, judgment, and after the High Court judgment, they are now in the Supreme Court. When there is a guarantee in the Constitution, why they did not implement that provision for OBC? So they had loopholes to avoid the constitutional provision even in the existing framework. As far as this policy is concerned, this policy talks about constitutional provision when it is talking about the language issue. The same word constitutional provision is not found when they talk about inclusiveness and equity. You can refer to that wherever they talk about making provisions for a disadvantage, they do not talk about the constitutional provision. My question is that many people say that even in the earlier policies, there is no mention about reservation. So here also, but here in the language area, you say constitutional provision. When you are very particular about the constitutional provision, when you're talking about the language area, why you do not talk about the constitutional provision in inclusiveness? Number one. Number two, you are diverting the discourse. The Constitution says economical backwardness and social backwardness. But this document is talking about socio-economically disadvantaged, social economically disadvantaged group. And a social economical disadvantaged group, all are clubbed. The gender, disabled, socially oppressed people, minorities, the economically disadvantaged people, all these people are clubbed under a single heading, what they call social economical disadvantaged group. And they coined a new term called as socio-economically disadvantaged based on socio-cultural identity. I'm not able to understand how the cultural identity can be backward. Whoever I am, my culture is something different. Your culture may be something different. Culturally, how can I be backward? I'm not able to understand. But they have coined the word socio-cultural identity. And under this heading, socio-cultural identity, they have mentioned about SC, ST, OBC, minorities. They told about minorities. They did not tell whether it is a religious minority or a linguistic minority. According to the Constitution, minority means it may be a linguistic minority or it may be a religious minority. And see the difficulty level of ST, SC, OBC, minority, gender, are they all equal? The difficulty level of oppressed section of a society is something different. A tribal person living in a hilly area without any accessibility, he faces all kind of oppression. And out of that oppression, out of the disability, he comes to a higher education institute. So you cannot club everybody together and say that performance-based grant, and the performance will be assessed. And if you do not perform, then your grant may be, that is what the NRF says, National Research Foundation, and under that clause says. Now my question is that while you are going to assess the performance, are you going to take the difficulty level of a physically challenged person? Is it easy? The physically challenged, we know only few physical challenges. There are several physical challenges. It has been listed out. Every physical challenge, it holds its own disability. And what about the social oppression, disability due to social oppression, due to geographical location and domicile? And all these factors must have some kind of a mark, isn't it? Some kind of a consideration should be there for the difficulty. Without considering the difficulty level, you only talk about the performance level means, that means, will you be going to the according to the constitution, or you are going to amend the constitution and bring this into effect? That we have to see how the process is going to happen. We are not sure about that, but this document does not talk anything about taking that difficulties into consideration. I think so. This answer covers, I won't say this an answer. My observation covers both the questions.
Thank you so much, sir. If anybody on this meeting has more questions, we can ask Gajendra Babu sir around it. Before that, I also noted this day that the MHRD website, which was seen as Ministry of Human Resource Development, has I think from the last few days or today maybe,
The
has
same day, very
changed
first
it
day.
to Ministry of Education.
Which is all right.
And we are also witnessing a large scale. Sir, I have this question in my mind. If the rights of the states are not considered, why do we actually see that the states are more and more inclined for the faster and proactive to the NEP's reception of it, and they have expressed their keenness to implement NEP in their respective states.
I do not know. The Karnataka has deliberately or explicitly stated that it is going to implement. Apart from Karnataka, maybe Uttar Pradesh. Apart from these two states, I do not know whether any other chief ministers have spoken like that we are going to implement. Most of the governments in the states are also neoliberal. I don't find any government in India, any state government in India, which is totally opposing the neoliberal agenda. If it is going to totally oppose the neoliberal agenda, then they should not have accepted the STARS project. The government has accepted the STARS project. Then that means the issue of neoliberal activity is there. Now, the specific question is something concerned with the right of a state government. So, in Tamil Nadu, there is a discussion. In the Tamil Nadu, the opposition parties are giving, it is not only at the educationist or teachers level, it has moved up to the political level. And the opposition leader has written a letter to the Prime Minister, to the Minister for Education Union of India. And there is a lot of political activity in Tamil Nadu to oppose this. It is not only, it is in the media, it comes that only a language policy is being discussed here. No, beyond language policy, we are seeing NEP as a threat to constitution. And the political parties are very strongly opposing it in Tamil Nadu, including the ruling party. But we do not know what stand the ruling party is going to take, because it has not announced its stand. The cabinet has not given its stand. Chief Minister has not said. Chief Minister has just said it will not accept the 3-language formula. Beyond that, the Chief Minister has not spoken anything. We want the Chief Minister to speak in Tamil Nadu. Like that, what I feel, we have to talk with every government, every political party at every state and every district. And we have to see the opposition comes from the state government. If the state governments are not going to oppose, then it will be very easy for the central government to implement it. So we should try in as many states. If it is even a ruling party, the central ruling party is in the state ruling party, then there will be an opposition party in the state, isn't it? At least we should ask the opposition party or the regional parties to raise their voice against the government in implementing this policy, which is going to take away the rights of the state government. We are taking away the rights of state government means taking away the welfare of the people of that state. The government will not have any power to take any welfare measures for the people of that particular states. So that we have to discuss at the state level.
Yes.
May I just ask two questions, Prince? One is, sorry, Shashank. One is that the Education Secretary has made a very strange comment. He said that we are going to implement this policy from the coming academic year.
Yes, ma'am.
And if state governments want to follow us, that is their choice. This is the first thing. This is very problematic, and I'm sure you'll be able to elaborate on this. The second thing is, on the language policy, there are two approaches they're taking. One is they talk about the 3-language formula, and then on the other hand, they talk about bilingual teaching of mathematics and science, etc. So there is a question, and bilingual means you have the state language and English.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how is this, do you think this is, I think this is keeping in mind the kind of opposition which has come from Tamil Nadu, and apart from Tamil Nadu, also from the Northeast, you're going to face this kind of problem. If you try to impose 3-language with Hindi and all that, it's going to be great difficulty in the Northeast.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Can I proceed?
So these two questions, yes, please.
I don't think from Professor Madhuji, this is the question. She's opening the floor for discussion. Say, the language of the document is deceitful, and the statement of the secretary is also deceitful.
Deceitful, right.
He knows very well, as an IAS officer, he knows very well that this policy cannot be implemented under the existing constitutional provisions and the existing laws. So he says in the document itself, in the last chapter, they try to mention about this carrying forward, the way forward. That the state and being a federal, the state and center both have to implement this. Those words are found there. So that words only he is reflecting. So if he says you can follow, then I will say the government of Tamil Nadu to say that I will not follow. Only when a challenge comes from the state that I will not follow, then we will know what will be the position of the central government. Suppose they make a rule that NTA is the admission even for the state government should not accept. You have NTA for your universities, your central universities, and not for the state universities. That is how the states have to react. That is only to convince the people or to cheat the people. Either this way or that way, either to cheat or whether to convince, or to say this and behind the screen compel the state to fall in line. They compel the state in many ways, not in one ways. So we do not know what they will do. They will say that we have not compelled anybody. We have given option to the states to follow, and states have followed. What we are going to do? So by compelling them behind the screens, they may try to do things, because this government is an opaque government. This government is not a transparent government. There is no accountability. There is no discussion. There is no democracy at any level in the present dispensation. Coming to the language issue, again it is deceitful. even up to standard 5, they say wherever possible up to 5th and preferably beyond 8 and beyond 8 will be. So in that sentence you have wherever possible. In the same sentence you have will be. So will be means what? Wherever there is dialect, wherever there is textbook, wherever there is all possibilities in that particular state or in that particular language, you are going to have up to class 5 or according to the convenience. We do not know what is the meaning of wherever. Where is an adjective of place, I believe. So wherever possible means, what do you mean? What do you mean the possibility geographically, the possibility at the government level, possibility whether the parent accept or not, possibility at the availability of textbook, teachers, etc. What possibility, wherever, in which context you are fixing that wherever is very important. Number 2, they say Sanskrit will be an optional subject from primary up till postdoctoral. It will be an optional subject. The same importance that they give for Sanskrit is not given, equally not given for any other language. Even when mentioning few classical languages, including Tamil, they say in addition. So it is only in addition or also, these are the words that they are using. They clearly say 3-language policy is only making the child learn a language. It is not multilingualism. Multilingualism is something different from the 3-language policy, what they are talking about. And as they proceed to the higher education, they only talk about 2 languages where they are very cleverly put mother tongue / home language / regional language. So you cannot say whether it is going to be a mother tongue, whether it is, they will say I have given all options. So but what they speak is that they want bring the tribal people into the mainstream education. And for that they want 2-language formula. That means what do they mean? English and another language should be a language spoken by the student. Is it possible or there is any provision for that? Nothing. Last budget, the finance minister allotted 50 crore rupees for training Hindi teachers for non-Hindi speaking states, not for any other language. So what do you mean by the 2-language at the higher level? Just by saying home language, mother tongue or regional language and another one as an English, we do not know at the end of the day what will be the language. At the end of the day, it may be Sanskrit and English also. I'm not sure about that.
Thank you so much, sir, for discussing the points brought out by Madhu ma'am. Now, I invite Dr. Vikas Gupta, sir, to probably give.
Start my video button to activate, press space bar, off space. Stop my video button to activate, press space bar, audio now unmuted. Video settings, button menu, press close, open, participant, open chat panel button.
Vikas, sir, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I am able to hear.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So, Prince, I missed the initial part of your presentation. My bad luck, but anyhow, that's always there in the recording. And like always, it was really, I mean, very provocative. And I think that is what we really wanted. And I think you really served that purpose. And I really believe that, you know, this presentation should be shared with all the education ministers of different states, you know, and they should be asked, you know, whether after this education policy, your portfolios will be left with any meaning, you know. So should we not, in the name of austerity, then close down your portfolios or let this policy not come? So, I mean, there's no reason to thank you for anything, but I think you have contributed significantly to carry on this discourse and hopefully leading to some action. In fact, I would like to also thank the webinar committee to really do this job so meticulously. And last, I want to make an announcement, and I think this is a very urgent one. We have the Presidium and the Secretariat of the AFRT has decided to organize teachers' consultations on the new education policy, national education policy, as approved by the cabinet. This will take place on 27th of August, that is just day after tomorrow, from 2:30 onwards. And we have already made an announcement to that effect today. We have, of course, given a link of registration so that we can share the Zoom invite with registered representatives of different teachers, organizations, and unions. Given the limitations of time, it became terribly difficult to actually individually and specifically reach out to these different organizations scattered over the country. But we feel that each one of us will take on this work of spreading the message around, and hopefully by tomorrow evening, we should have a good number of teacher organizations represented on this Google form so that we can send them the link, and we all are able to talk to them on day after tomorrow. I mean, AFRT की Presidium Secretariat ने ये तय किया है कि परसों 27 अगस्त 2020 को 2:30 बजे से Zoom पर एक ऑल इंडिया कंसल्टेशन विद टीचर्स ऑन द NEP 2020 ऑर्गेनाइज करने का, और उसके लिए आज हमने एक नोटिस भी इशू कर दिया है। और उस नोटिस में ये कहा गया है कि हर टीचर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन और यूनियन से हम उम्मीद करते हैं 3 डेलीगेट्स यहाँ इस चर्चा में शामिल करवाने के लिए। And out of these 3 delegates, 1 will be surely given the opportunity to speak also. और वो इतनी समय की सीमा की वजह से ये नहीं हो पाया है कि इंडिविजुअली हम मतलब सेंट्रल टीम की तरफ से ऑफिस बेरर्स तक पहुंच सके हर टीचर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के। तो ये एक अपील है उन सभी लोगों से जो यहाँ भी जूम में शामिल हैं या जो लोग फेसबुक पे सुन रहे हैं कि इस मैसेज को जिन भी टीचर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स को आप जानते हो वहाँ लेकर जाएं और उनकी जो कांटेक्ट डिटेल्स है वो इस गूगल फॉर्म में भरवाएं, ताकि हम उन्हें परसों होने वाले जूम में पर जो चर्चा होने वाली है टीचर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के साथ उनको उसका इनवाइट भेज सकें। और क्योंकि पार्लियामेंट के सेशन से पहले हम चाहते हैं कि स्टूडेंट्स, टीचर्स और राइट्स ग्रुप्स के साथ इस तरह की चर्चाएं, राउंड टेबल्स ऑर्गेनाइज कर सके। वी रियली वांट टू ऑर्गेनाइज दीज राउंड टेबल्स विद students, teachers, and rights groups one by one, and we want to build a movement. And क्योंकि 5th September some of our member organizations are already planning, 5 सितंबर को कुछ teacher organizations already plan कर रहे हैं कि हम mobilization करें और एक program of action लें। तो we really want to explore all possibilities of joint action as early as possible. This is to be decided by them whether this is on the 5th or whenever, but 5th is of course one possibility. तो आप सबसे ये गुजारिश है कि इसको जल्द से जल्द अपने नेटवर्क्स में स्प्रेड करें। व्हाट्सएप पे भी है, वो ईमेल पे भी भेजा है। And I request Shashank, either Shashank or anybody who has the access to our Facebook pages, please share this on our Facebook page on urgent basis. If it is not uploaded there already, fine. So that it reaches out to a larger number of people.
Sure. Vikas, yeah. I think formally you should approach AI Factor and FedCuta.
Yeah, Madhuji, please, you do that, please, formally.
No, you as organizing secretary.
Madhuji, please try.
You don't understand. You just send them a letter, just draft a letter and send it to them.
Madhuji, we'll discuss
Very
that. I think this is going live.
One can ring up.
Madhuji, this is going live. We will discuss this.
Okay, sorry.
So once the live session is over, you can talk about it. So that is an appeal that I really request everybody to just spread the word. All our crusaders or whatever, warriors or whatever better word. I mean, basically, we are all against the policy, trying to put together some form of resistance. And time is running short. Therefore, you know, I mean, no office bearer of AFRT can really effectively manage to reach out to all teacher organizations. We are also planning to reach out to student organizations. So it's like, it's a collective struggle. So we really appeal that, you know, प्लीज ट्रीट दिस, जैसे वो पहले कहते थे ना कि चिट्ठी को तार समझना, तो वैसे समझ के आप प्लीज सबसे गुजारिश है शामिल हों और इस सांझी लड़ाई को, इस ज्वाइंट स्ट्रगल को आगे ले जाने का काम करें. That's what I wanted to say today. And once again, thanks to all the people who have put in a lot of energy to organize this webinar today. Comradely thanks to carry on the movement forward. That's it. Including our chairperson. I think she, you know, our chairperson has been really working. I think this is very extraordinary that, you know, a chairperson of such a big organization is giving so much of time, making so much of effort to make sure that, you know, we are able to achieve something. So thanks to everyone, and thanks to the audience and all participants. That's it.
Yes. Before we end, we request from AFRT to share these videos in your friends and family circles and also your colleague circles, so that we are able to reach out to a large number of people with